I just want to start this off by saying I'm not a doctor and I don't mean to intend any of this information as medical advice, and to please consult your medical practitioner before trying any kind of treatment modalities or things that you learn about. So in my experience, here's things that I've learned through my journey of Lyme disease and what has personally helped me to recover and what I believe can help the majority of people going through this process to recover. After speaking to many people that had asked about how I overcame and treated my Lyme disease, I wanted to go ahead and make a video about it to describe it more in depth so that I can help anybody that might be going through that situation themselves, different treatments they can use, the ways that it's diagnosed, and some of the controversies regarding the topic. So when I had Lyme disease, I developed it at 22 years old. I was at an ex-girlfriend's ranch in Pennsylvania. I had gotten bitten by a tick and didn't realize for a few weeks later, after I'd flown back to California because I was dating her long distance for some time, I started getting symptoms and very sick a couple months later after that initial tick bite and visit to Pennsylvania at that ranch. I had symptoms go on that were very severe for about a year to a year and a half before I got a proper diagnosis. The issue with this, with Lyme disease, is that it mimics a lot of different illnesses, so it's very hard to diagnose, to know what to look for, unless you live in an epidemic area like the East Coast. But being in California, especially Southern California, it's not something that's often looked at from doctors. The reason I got diagnosed was after going to different neurologists, the hospital many times, and people acknowledging that there was something going on but they didn't know what, and referring me to different people. I did some research on my own online, and unsurprisingly, I found out about the symptoms I had very matching Lyme disease, and given the prior exposure and place I was, it was very just common sense that that was probably what was going on. So I went to my doctor's office and got a ELISA test for Lyme disease, and it came back negative. And here's where the controversy with Lyme disease can kind of happen. With traditional methods from the CDC, the testing isn't very sensitive. So you might have a lot of people that are sick with Lyme disease, but then show up negative in their testing. The ELISA test isn't as sensitive as the Western blot. So when I did the Western blot, I got an indeterminate result, as opposed to the ELISA, which showed a negative. Indeterminate means that there was some kind of positive strain activity, but not enough to give a positive result of an active infection. So because I didn't have enough activity to show active infection to that test, they considered it, that their testing standards to not be an active infection. The thing about it though, is that if you have any type of reaction to that test, right, a positive strain activity, it shows that you've had some exposure at some point in your life. And I might have had earlier exposure in my life, but the thing was I never got treatment for it. So whether it was from that experience or even earlier in my life, wasn't really mattering. The fact was I had the active symptoms of it, and I had positive activity. And when you're sick for so long and your immune system is overwhelmed by something like Lyme disease, you're not going to be able to produce sufficient antibodies to show for this test. So that's another tricky thing about it, right? And so I had to go to a Lyme literate medical doctor, a vector-borne disease specialist. This doctor named, I won't get the name of because I don't want to, put that out there, but it was a doctor attached to Los Robles Medical Hospital that worked, again, as a vector-borne disease specialist. So tick-borne illnesses was one of his areas of expertise. He gave me a test for the Western blot again, and sent it to a testing lab that does more sensitive testing in Palo Alto, California. I believe the company was called IGenix, and finally got the results I needed to show, okay, yes, there's an active infection along with your symptoms, the clinical manifestation, right, and the testing result. They deemed me, okay, you're positive for Lyme disease. So I started treatment. The challenge of treatment is that traditional antibiotics for a lot of people is hard to tolerate, and my stomach already had a lot of issues dealing with pain and issues with digestion. I don't know if that was from the Lyme disease or just other things I had going on, but the point being, when I took those antibiotics, I could not handle it whatsoever. So I had to stop. And then there was this protocol through a company about herbal treatment of Lyme disease through these herbs from a company called Nutrimedics. And so I tried that. And then along with some other, more gentle treatments from that doctor. And that was called the Dr. Coden protocol. I responded fairly well to that, but I was still very, very sick. My symptoms were just like always unrefreshing sleep, constant just headaches and pain and fatigue and exhaustion, no short-term memory recall. My memory, my sense of thinking was just skewed. Like I was hard. It was like I wasn't getting enough oxygen to my brain, and it showed that in tests as well, that there was not enough oxygen flow to my brain because of some kind of, I don't know if it's an inflammatory response or whatever from the infection, but it affected my sensory processing, okay, along with all those other symptoms, which are by the thousands. I don't want to get too much into the symptoms on this video of my particular case beyond what I've already spoken about, because I want to put more of the focus on the treatment and recovery. So, long story short, with the Coden protocol, I tried it for a little bit, but I wanted to get something more thorough because I felt like it wasn't quite doing enough for me. So through my own research and my doctor's following to work with him, I found out about a system called the Stephen Buhner Healing Lyme Disease and Co-Infection books. So Dr. Stephen Buhner has a protocol, an herbal treatment protocol for Lyme disease, and he wrote a book called Healing Lyme Disease and Co-Infections that had 2 iterations. One of the books was created in the late 90s, and then he created a second book back in maybe 2015 or 16, I believe, was the second edition. And that was a couple years after I was already sick. But he also wrote other books on treatment co-infections, which is a big component of Lyme disease itself too, because you might have the initial Borrelia infection, but then those co-infections that can transmit with the ticks along with that primary infection. And what I was dealing with, I had symptoms of Bartonella and Borrelia. Additionally, I just tried different herbs based on the core protocol herbs through Dr. Stephen Buhners' treatment of Lyme disease that he prescribes, along with different herbs based on certain symptoms I had and certain suspected co-infections. So I had these herbs like Andrographis, I had Japanese knotweed, I had cat's claw, I also had tinctures like Chinese knotweed. There were, various other herbs I used as well. I used certain herbs for energy and such as well, like Lutheria root. But in Stephen's books, he talks about the proper dosing of the herbs and the protocols to stick to based on your certain symptoms, possible co-infections, and your response to treatment. And the treatment itself is meant to go slow and work your way up gradually, introducing one herb at a time to build up your tolerance until you're on a more full dosing schedule with all of the different components you're using for your treatment. For a while, for my own treatment, I wasn't taking nearly enough dosing that I needed. And so my other way of healing and dealing with the Lyme disease and recovering was by oxygenation. I'm sorry, I'm skewing my words here. Just getting more blood flow and heat going in my body. The oxygenation of tissue, right? So anaerobic exercise, weightlifting, resistance style exercise, I believe, and different doctors have talked about this in their own approach with patients, it is almost a necessary component for recovery for a lot of people when they're at a stage that they can tolerate it. Aerobic activity can cause people to set back their symptoms because the aerobic capacity can be limited with the Lyme disease and cause a rebound effect of illness. Whereas the anaerobic activity helps to oxygenize the blood and tissues in the body. It helps to raise your core body temperature, and Lyme disease is very heat sensitive. So it's a great way to flush out the bacteria and to kind of deal with the illness in that capacity. It's a one way of treating it, right? Through oxygenation and raising the body temperature to kind of kill off that infection and to get the blood flow going and to get that kind of out of your system, flushed out of your system, get your lymphatic system going and everything such as that. So the exercise along with the herbs was a huge help for me. If you're interested in knowing more about the herbs, just check out Stephen Buhners' literature and books. He has a lot of herbalists under him that can give people more guidance and teaching. If you need somebody to work with directly, that is available. So the exercise and the herbs really helped me a lot. And I got to the point eventually where I did the proper dosing of them. And so I started feeling relief, more easily, but it took a matter of, a few months or longer to really feel those effects more in full. I spent 9 months in severe illness. I would say severe. I wasn't bedbound, but I was housebound, but just severe symptoms. And then after the 9 months, I had a couple years of intermittent symptoms and just not feeling 100% normal, but about 80% recovered. But the last 20% I was really struggling with. And the reason was I just wasn't going enough with my treatment. But I had enough of my lifestyle and the exercise component down that I was able to just manage and get, most of my health being functional. So that was good. But after going back and then doing things proper with my treatments, I was able to flush it out completely to now I just don't deal with any Lyme disease, no symptoms. I was very sick for a long time. Well, I was very sick for 9 months plus that 1.5 years prior of treatment. And that little residual, just like life after Lyme disease that I was going through until I just really hit the hammer on the head with it and did more with my treatments again to fully recover. So, I was in a late stage of the Lyme disease, but I still was able to recover. There are many, many patients, like Stephen Buhner has worked with over thousands of patients. Some were sick for decades, and still fully recovered. So I believe that anybody going through it, the most majority of people can fully recover once they get on the right help that is beneficial to them to recover their health again. I don't think anybody develops Lyme disease and is just sick for the rest of their life, I know for a certain set of individuals that there are certain inflammatory processes that can happen in different parts of the body that can leave some damage. And that's something that people need to manage and work around and heal as well. Like I didn't deal with like a Lyme arthritis, right? Like an inflammatory arthritis from the Lyme disease. Mine was more centralized around like nervous system, fatigue, sleep, cognition, what have you. So, it's important to look out for those things as well and to address it accordingly. I also am not saying that antibiotics are ineffective or that it's something that you shouldn't do. I think antibiotics can be very useful, especially doxycycline, like a 3-month treatment of doxycycline or whatever have you, right? But the multiple intravenous antibiotics, I just don't know like how good that is for somebody's body, in my opinion, and if the benefits are worth the risks, right? Because with these herbs I take, the side effects are benign. You can have allergic reactions, but you're not going to have like some devastatingly ill effects. The only thing that can happen for certain individuals, and it's very important that you get continued blood work, is that it can affect for a small set of individuals, like with green tea extract, it can affect your liver enzymes or your kidney function, right? So some of your organs, if you're taking too much, your body isn't properly able to filter things out. For a certain small set of individuals, it can raise enzymes of liver, or it can affect things with the kidney, and it's just that flushing out. So that's very important to look out for, and that's why you have to work with your doctor to get continued blood work to make sure that you're not doing anything that's going to have those effects. But other than that, like if you're staying in consistent care, getting regular blood work, and just doing things in a way that you're building your dosing up properly, you're not going to really run into much issues. And if anything happens, you can reassess and look at your situation and change tactics from there. There's things you can swap out for other, treatments, or if you replace one herb for another one that you aren't as reactive to. But the thing is, for most people, that is a big struggle. Is I've talked to many different people, and for a large majority that I've spoken to, I notice when you're in the middle of being sick and you're just going through the process, right? It's easy to lose hope and to just kind of give into the situation you're in. There's nothing wrong with surrender. It's a very necessary process of having surrender and acceptance to your situation. You're not trying to fight the Lyme disease. You're just trying to work with your body, work with your mind, to having a peace and equilibrium to just address the illness and have a cohesive healing of unity. There's not this battle and wage and stress and strain in recovery. It's already hard enough on your body and mind to go through it. You don't have to add more fuel to the fire. It's just this natural harmony of bacteria, viruses, human cells, the integrity of the human body, what have you. So we're just trying to reacclimate a healthy level of well-being, a healthy level of physiological health, helping to restabilize the human body and to heal it of illness. So the illness is already stressful enough. We don't got to add more strain and suffering to that. That aside, one of the other things that helped me a lot was working on methylation, because I found out that I was heterozygous for a mutation that made me process folate less effectively, folate acid specifically. And that could affect the processing and detoxification of the bacteria out of my body and other processes of pollutants and what have you that are in the environment. So, I got on the methyl B12 and the methylfolate. And methylation support is a very helpful thing for a lot of people, and it can be important to look into getting some blood work done to see what kind of mutations you might be working with, because that can be something important to address as you're recovering from the Lyme disease. One of the other very important supplements I think that people should take is magnesium. Lyme disease patients often have a deficiency in magnesium, and it's important to replace that deficiency, because having deficient magnesium levels makes stress a lot harder on the body, makes sleep a lot more difficult, and just all around enzymatic processes are very affected when there isn't enough magnesium. And having a little supplemental magnesium can just be good for the body as well, given that you speak with your doctor and don't have any previous medical conditions that would give a adverse reason to this for whatsoever. But yeah, the supplemental magnesium can be a big importance. Aside from that, Lyme disease can affect the collagen in the body. So there's certain things I take for my joints and tendons and skin health and everything. For aging itself and just for the Lyme disease, just very good supplements for anybody to be on, right? So the avocado soy uncephanelias, I don't know how to pronounce that, but Avovita. I did the research studies, I read the research studies on different joint supplements, and after looking through a lot of published articles, I found that this particular supplement, along with boswellia extract and a collagen supplement, like if you're going to do bone broth soup, or you get like collagen pills or powder or what have you, those three things can be very beneficial for collagen production, joint and tendon health. I'm an athlete. I do a lot of martial arts and resistance training and stuff. So even for just that, it's helpful for me. And I don't really have much joint issues, Lyme disease aside, but you know, a lot of people deal with injuries and stuff from martial arts or from sports and stuff, and so you know, it helps me stay healthy in that way as well. Some other supplements I take is, I don't even know how to pronounce this, acetaminophen, I believe. This is really good for your skin. It acts as like a natural sunscreen. I also wear sunscreen every day as a natural sunscreen to help against cellular damage from the sun, because it can affect the cells in the body, because in a sense it is a form of radiation. And you know, sun exposure is good and healthy for you, because you do want to see like some amount of sun, but skin damage can have some cellular effects beyond just the appearance level. CoQ10 is very cellularly protective of mitochondria and your cells. It's a very good one to get on for just general health and anybody going through Lyme disease. Vitamin D3 is often deficient in a lot of chronic illness patients, and that can be something that is useful to supplement, but it's also important to get blood work for. So I take vitamin D3, 5,000 IU once a day. When it comes to the herbs, one more thing I wanted to mention real quick is I'm really into biohacking and stuff, and there's certain things about long-term cellular health in the body as well that certain supplements are known to be helpful with. And this is one of those big ones, NMN. It's a precursor formula for nicotinamide mononucleotide. There was research done on these rats that showed when they were given a certain this like supplement, like this certain compound, that it prevents aging in the mice. So these really older mice were, you know, fed this certain type of compound, vitamin, and it reversed biological aging. So I'm not saying like a 90-year-old is going to have a 30-year-old body after taking a good dosing of stuff like this, but if you start it at whatever age you start it, it's just like a neuroprotective thing to take, and just good for long-term cellular health. One caveat to this stuff that I mentioned though, is that certain people that are predisposed to cancer, had cancer in the past, have a large family history of cancer, you want to look into that first before taking this supplement, right? And also the methyl B12, because it helps to facilitate cellular dividing and replication. And cancer can also be in one of those categories of uncontrolled cellular replication that becomes a disease state. So I don't really have much of a family history of it, and I didn't have prior cancer, so it's not something that I'm too concerned about for myself. But if somebody does, speak to your doctor about it, do a little research on it, and decide if you feel comfortable taking that, because that is important to look into. Hydroxy B12 and other forms of B12 you can take besides the methyl B12, which might have, you know, different effects, because if you do have those mutations, it is important to try to do something about it. But yeah, so for the herbs themselves, you know, people always ask like, well, why does Lyme disease treatment have to be so expensive? It really doesn't, okay? There are a lot of snake oil things out there. There's a lot of overpriced, just stupid treatments. Some might be marginally effective, some might be very effective, but it shouldn't cost you tens of thousands of dollars to recover your health. I pay only a few $100s every few months or longer on my herbs and my tinctures. My supplements cost me a little more. They're not really needed for the Lyme disease recovery. Some of them, I just like to take them for my general health. But a lot of good ways you can save money is you buy these bulk powder herbs. They're on places like Amazon and just different websites. You want to make sure that it's a certified herb facility. You want to get organic or wildcrafted every time, because you don't want any pesticides in your herbs. There's a lot of great companies and products on the internet that you can get in these powder forms. And how I do it is I just mix the powders together in a glass of water and I just drink it 3 times a day. Tinctures, same thing. You can actually make your own tinctures. You could pay far less than even I'm paying if you buy bulk powder herbs and you make your own tinctures with all of them, because you just let this saturate in the alcohol and tincture for a few months, and then you kind of, well, I don't remember the whole process of it, but you know, in the end, you're basically having these powders that can last you years because the tinctures kind of absorb the nutrients of that and put it into this kind of form where you bypass the need of buying a premium on a product like this that I do, for the convenience of just having it pre-made for you, right? If you make it yourself. So that's pretty cool. I just never went through the process myself for that because I'm not paying too much now, and it's a little tedious for me to learn, but I probably should, because again, I should save more money if I can, right? But yeah, you know, after doing all of these things, I eventually recovered fully. You know, I got out of that 80% to 100% recovered. But it is something that takes time. It takes time, and you have to have an acceptance of that. And it is an up and down process, because you're gonna have weeks and days where you're feeling a lot better, and then you're gonna have setbacks. But the long term, you know, you gotta just look at the long-term picture and just accept these setbacks and kind of 2 steps forward, 1 step back process of recovery, because it's a normal and regular part of the process, and there's nothing wrong if that happens, because in the end, it all does work out. And so, for people that get stuck, it's just good to know that yes, you can get better. There is treatment available. It can be kind of legwork to kind of figure things out and navigate it, but there are, you know, people that are experienced that can help guide you through it. And it's just a great thing that the internet's available, that we can have all this information at our fingertips. But it's important to be self-aware and have discernment, you know, because we don't want to be desperate and fall into the predatory things that people put out there that aren't going to be a benefit of us and just lose us a lot of money. So yeah, you know, that's what I would say about all that. I think if you get on the right treatments, like I did the Stephen Buhner protocol, and if you follow it to the T and you don't give up and you persevere, for most people, that will be enough. If there's other things you need to address in your life, you can do that as well. I had to change my diet. I had a wheat sensitivity, so I took that out of my diet. I don't tolerate artificial ingredients in foods, so I cut that out. I don't eat any sugar. I don't like sugar, but it's also not very healthy for me. And when you have Lyme disease, sugar has some negative effects. So, you know, I don't eat sugar. No artificial ingredients like sucrose or aspartame. It's no MSG. Most of the stuff I cook is actually like whole foods, and I cook it myself. I don't do a whole lot of like preserved foods, but I'm gluten-free. I eat a lot of meats. I eat vegetables, a little bit of fruit, but I don't eat much fruit at all actually right now, but I like blueberries. Not that that's important, but you know, yeah, the treatment's gonna look a little different for each person, based on different things, circumstances in your life and your biology, but there are central things that can be beneficial for everybody. And I believe that the Stephen Buhner treatment of Lyme disease, his herbal protocols, for the majority of people, it will work and it will be effective, but it does take time, and you have to build your way up. So if you're one of those people that tries for a couple weeks and then stops, you know, it's not going to get you that far. You have to be for it in the long term. And if you just baby dose it and never raise the doses enough to a medicinal level, then you're never going to get those full effects. If you're have to streamline everything to health, and it's a pain, right? It's a pain to have to do all this work, but in the end, I can promise you that it absolutely pays off. I appreciate your time, and hope you guys do well. Thank you.